These members were away for a short recess and they resumed sittings yesterday afternoon, a sitting in which saw a very interesting discussion. The National Assembly has produced the Kiswahili version of the standing orders. The standing orders is a document that guides proceedings of the House, and that Kiswahili version will be presented to the public for scrutiny. The exercise that has been set aside for tomorrow, at least as per the directive of the Speaker, and it will be a forum whereby members of the public will be allowed to come in and just see firsthand what happens in Parliament, which is our bicameral Parliament, the Senate, the National Assembly, and of course they get to input into that particular document, the Kiswahili version of the standing orders. This morning, Wednesday, traditionally dedicated to private members' bills and motions, and as such, we expect the
staff to the Speaker. I don't know where Honorable John Amboro got those powers. Honorable Speaker, and I've tried as much as possible to educate some of these monos, Honorable Speaker, and it's proving very difficult. I think you'll have to take them to their launch. Your launch, I will take over from you.
You are actually out of order. You are out of order. There are no monos in this assembly. Well, even from the description itself, a mono is, it means one. Every member here is probably doing his second term. If there is a mono, there could be only one or two who just came the other day, but we do not have those terms here. We left them to those other institutions that are currently undertaking examinations now. Now, in this particular one, Honorable Member for Larry, of course, I think he's very anxious to have this matter answered, and therefore he decided that he would want to refer himself. But
the children and also the young generation. Mr. Speaker, if the government can afford to get free primary education, where students and pupils are being educated up to standard 8, and more so the emphasis which is now in place by the Jubilee government to have each and every child who gets to standard 8 moves on to Form 1, 2, 3, and 4 before we get to the CBC curriculum. If that one, if the emphasis is there, the same emphasis should continue from Form 4. What happens to that child or to that student? Because they are still teenagers, they are young, they are tender, and they need now to develop skills before they mature up, and so that they can proceed. But if they are left at that level, Mr. Speaker, and they don't continue, despite the efforts and the input and the resources which had been put by the government from standard 1 to Form 4, they will go to waste. It will be just the water under the bridge, because from there, that is when the child or that youngster requires skills most. I appreciate the government is trying to put up TVET institutions or technical training institutes in each and every constituency. And the emphasis should be continued, and it should be fast-tracked. But then these institutions, they are also charging some fees, and this fee is being charged if one has been sponsored up to Form 4, and then you move to the tertiary institution, and the sponsorship ends there. Therefore, you don't proceed. So it's important that the government also factors some money in its budget, so that when one gets to Form 4, then you are sponsored to go to the university. If you qualify, you are sponsored to go to a technical training institute to acquire skills which can make you earn a daily living. You can be sponsored to go and do training like as a nurse or teachers or any other training. But once we end it there, it becomes very important, Mr. Speaker. I'm not forgetting that there is the HELP, Education Loans Board, which is giving loans to these needy children. I am aware, even the technical training institutes, there is some subsidy which is being given by the government. But that is not enough. A student is required now to buy, maybe to get his own hostel. The student is supposed to get tools for that training. The student is required to get food and many other accessories which go by these technical jobs. So I agree with the Honorable Wambugu. We need to push further and get 100% transition, 100% sponsorship, and 100% follow-up, whereby we get this child or this youngster. Once you are through with your education, you are an accomplished plumber, you are an accomplished mason, you are an accomplished machine operator, you are an accomplished carpenter, or any other which you have trained yourself. And in that case, you go into the job market, you can be resourceful. But presently, we are getting students living at Form 4. After Form 4, you get good marks. You cannot go to the job market, to the university. And at the end of the day, you become a border operator. You become a hustler here and there, going to hawk small things in the streets. And that one doesn't make ends meet. And more so, others now go to drugs, others go to crime, and many other vices which are in the community, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I strongly recommend this motion, which will put more flesh, will put more material in what the government is currently doing to supplement or to see that we have 100% transition with our students in learning institutions, and more so, let it be a law, let it be mandatory that it is the responsibility of the government to continue as from there. And I strongly believe the resources required for this bit of the training after Form 4 is much lower than what already the government is putting in. So to up the budget a little bit, and at the end of the day, we shall have this one accomplished. I support the motion, Mr. Speaker.
Next would be Honorable Makali Mulu, if he has not spoken on this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to confirm that I have not spoken on this motion. And I want from the onset to say that I support those. And what this motion is proposing is to have the same 100% transition from secondary schools to tertiary institutions, which will promote vocational training. And Mr. Speaker, the reason why this motion is very important is because when you look at the Vision 2030, look at the Big Four agenda, you realize that there is a lot of push towards the area of industrialization. And we've come to realization that for this country to grow and have sustained growth, we need to do much more, Mr. Speaker, in the area of industrialization. So, Mr. Speaker, when I see the objective of this motion, when I look at it, I realize that this motion is very well targeted in terms of achieving that goal. Mr. Speaker, you realize that once students clear Form 4, most of them would join universities. Others, very few, will join vocational institutions, and more so, those who are from the rich families. And our own children from the poor background, Mr. Speaker, very few manage to move beyond Form 4. And basically because they cannot afford the fees to join tertiary institutions. We have polytechnics, we have technical institutions, but you realize there's a huge number of students who actually just go out there and engage in activities which are not sustainable in terms of generating income. One of the areas which has really taken care of these students who are not able to go to these vocational institutions is the area of border. But Mr. Speaker, when you look at the whole issue of border, you realize that it is not sustainable. Someone cannot be a border rider up to the age of retirement age. So some will not be able to continue getting income for a long time. It's just for a short time, and then they start doing other things. But looking at this area of vocational training, Mr. Speaker, this is an area which we have a huge demand in this country in terms of the skills. I want to give an example, Mr. Speaker. If you go to your local town and you want to put up a small structure, a commercial structure, and you look for a plumber, an electrician, a carpenter, you realize, Mr. Speaker, you might have to wait for a week or two to get such people in your township. And basically because most of our youth are no longer interested in these areas. But I can tell you for sure, Mr. Speaker, this is an area which will guarantee our youth self-employment and sustainable employment. Why am I saying so? For you now to hire a plumber, they are no longer charging their rates per day because they know the demand is so high. It's now more of piece rate. You go, they tell you, I want to work for you for this area, you pay me 5,000. And you, Mr. Speaker, imagining it will take 2-3 days. It takes about 4 hours. He gets this 5,000 is in the pocket, and they move to another job. And I think to me, this is the way to go, Mr. Speaker. So this motion is is good for this country. Because if it can really be implemented, although we are only urging the government, I wish it can move to the next level, Mr. Speaker, it will make sure that our youth are self-employed. The other area which is important, Mr. Speaker, is through vocational training. You realize even our daughters and our sons who have disability challenges are able actually to do a lot of work. I want to give an example, Mr. Speaker. I have a school in my constituency called Kitui School for the Mentally Handicapped. Those are our sons who are not mentally challenged. And Mr. Speaker, I went there the other day because I'd done some work for them. And I was very impressed with the kind of things they are doing, despite their disability. Because they have been trained, Mr. Speaker, they're able to make very good kiondos, they are able to make very good decoration. And what was very encouraging is when they sell those items, the money goes to small business like selling biscuits, but once they get this skill, you find that disability, you go to secondary schools and universities, also access polytechnics. And I can assure honorable members that they will get value for that investment. The other point, Mr. Speaker, which is important, is the point that, Mr. Speaker, after the training, there are also corporate institutions, some banks, and I want to single out a bank like KCB, Mr. Speaker, where you realize that KCB has come up with a program where those who have been trained can actually be provided with the equipment. So if you are a trained saloonist, you can be given those equipments which go together with all the tools which a saloonist requires. If you have been trained on welding, Mr. Speaker, you can be provided with this equipment on a small loan where you pay a very low interest. And I would want to encourage, Mr. Speaker, more corporates to get to the area of not even giving loans, providing grants as a way of social corporate responsibility. That they can provide grants for such students, Mr. Speaker, and in that case, then the students will be able to employ themselves. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say in this house that self-employment now is the way to go. This idea of going to offices to look for formal jobs, what you used to call the white-collar jobs, Mr. Speaker, they are no longer obtainable. And I think the time has come, Mr. Speaker, now, where people need to think more of self-employment. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, which is important is the issue of what I would call, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of looking critically at the whole issue of financing the graduates once they complete education. In addition to this small grants which are coming from corporate, the government needs to come up with a proper mechanism to make sure that we have a budget provision so that once the students graduate, Mr. Speaker, they are provided with the tools. And if that happens, Mr. Speaker, I see this country going very far in terms of achieving the Vision 2030 and the Big Four, and more so the area of the housing pillar, Mr. Speaker. Because, you know, the arrangement is through the housing pillar, Mr. Speaker, it had been decided, although I don't know that it will be implementable, that once you are given those houses to construct, Mr. Speaker, as a contractor, and to do with the windows, doors, those small bits have to be locally manufactured by Kenyans. So that if it's welding, Kenyans will come up with all the windows, Mr. Speaker. If it's the doors, our carpenters will go out there and make sure that we have all the doors. And Mr. Speaker, we are talking about thousands and thousands of doors, thousands and thousands of windows. And if that is the way to go, Mr. Speaker, then I can see this kind of generating employment for our youth and at the same time making sure that money goes to their pockets. As I conclude, Mr. Speaker, I would be urging Honorable Wambuku, after this motion urging the government is passed, he needs to think seriously about upgrading this to a bill so that it's something which can be enforced in this house and it's something which can be force the government to allocate budget for this important motion. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support. Thank you.
Honorable Ibrahim Mude. Honorable Mude,
Mr. Speaker, kindly allow me to use this 1 minute. I had requested this card.
Oh. What is your name, Honorable Member? Well, now that you have the mic anyway, proceed, because you are seated there and you are third from that place anyway. So proceed. But who is this? Okay, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to support this motion by Honorable Wambuku. I believe this motion is timely because it's dealing with a very critical area. And before I continue with that comment, kindly also allow me to pass my sympathies to those people living in Mao Trust lands, because you know we are in the National Assembly where we deal with national issues affecting our people. And I thought maybe because they are just approaching their deadline, I believe it's Thursday or when, it's their last day, the end of the 60 days, before they are evicted from the lands where they possess the title deeds, that I send my sympathies from this house, that it is very unfortunate that they are being evicted when they own the land. I know for all of us, when we are looking for any land to purchase, we always inquire if that piece of land has a title deed. Once you are told it has a title deed, then you have no other ways, you will be interested to buy. It's so unfortunate that their title deeds have been considered worthless, and that is like piece of paper, even though it was issued from government offices. It is also quite unfortunate that there is lots of discrimination. If we talk of people owning land in forest areas or formerly forest areas, there are many. It could be very good for the government to look like it's not discriminating against the poor. If they were also to touch those who are having huge chunks of land, formerly in Mao Forest, like the Finlays, the Unilever, all those used to be part of the larger Mao Forest. Even the Tagich farms, which are also associated with the former First family, is also there. I understand also even in Apathea Forest, the current First family is also having deep plantation or associated with them. But no one is talking about those ones. It is only that land which is owned by the poor, which can only be mentioned and associated with the lack of rainfall. Now that we have lots of rainfall in this country, no one is talking about
Honorable
Mao.
Tanui, if you could relate what you are saying, for example, to the transitional issues because it could probably be relevant. But what you have just done is to completely get out of the, the track. I understand that is a very emotive issue as far as you are concerned.
Yes.
But also we must, follow the rules, that it must be fairly relevant. And I can see it is relevant. It's only that you are refusing to connect it. But proceed, I hear what you have.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm guided. We know, of course, the people who are living in this area, they also have kids. And these kids also need to transition to go 100% from primary school to secondary school to the tertiary institutions which we are talking of. And that cannot happen when we have the government harassing them. The same government which we truly supported 100%, and we misguided the same people that we are about to elect angels into office. It's unfortunate that the same people have retreated, and what we see is the face of the CS environment and the regional commissioner. Those are simply appointees of those the Ururuto, which we used to sing loudly in public rallies. But those are the people who really control the power. And those are the ones whom we could appeal to ensure that these people are allowed to enjoy their lands where they have the titles, or at least they can be relocated somewhere. But I don't understand when we are told their tea estates are forests and does not affect environment, but the tea estates, the tea plantations planted by these people in these same areas does not assist as a form of forest cover. It is quite absurd, is the height of hypocrisy which we have as Jubilee government. It's so unfortunate when we continue to harass our people and ensuring that their kids does not get quality education, that their future is compromised by the action of the people who are in power, whom I do consider them to be real hypocrites. Because if they do own business of land in forests and they never comment on it, but they only concentrate on the lands owned by the poor, is very unfair. We also need to be associating, when we get good rains like we are currently having, we need to associate the same with the Mau forest, that we have protected the Mau forest. That is the whole area where people in that area have really protected the forest, and that is why it's raining heavily in this republic. We never. But when drought comes,
and I can see it is the police measures to ensure the 100% transition from secondary education to tertiary education. So let's go there, Honorable Tanui. Let's go there. And you know you are an educationist yourself.
Thank you.
A very serious one.
Thank you.
I can assure you, I know it is not that you did not understand this.
Yes, I have understood.
I know it is where your emotions are. So
Mr.
proceed.
Speaker, Mr. Speaker, you know, when, even in school I was a slow learner. I learned things slowly. So thank you for your guidance. I am learning slowly.
Well, having known you even from your schooling days, I know that is absolutely not true. So you proceed and I know how sharp you are.
Thank you. Let me appreciate also the government for what it is doing to ensure that we have a 100% transition, especially by creating the so many technical institutions in many of our constituencies. I believe that is something in a positive direction, that we are now going to be creating, we are creating the right skills. We are going to be having the institutions which can train our people to be self-reliant, self-employed, which can train even our people in such a way that we can now start exporting labor to go outside this country. That can only be achieved if we can get 100% transition from primary and also from secondary to our tertiary institution, either the tech development institutions, either these other colleges or the universities where they can get the skills. I think what we only need to emphasize on is also to guide our kids on the kind of courses they need to do once they transit through that 100% transition. For example, I did attend a graduation in one of the universities. And when those who were being awarded with a degree in business education were given a chance to stand, I believe it was nearly 2/3 of all those who are graduating. And you simply wonder, if everyone is having a degree in business, where will they go? I think we need to have the relevant courses being taught in our universities. We need to ensure that when our kids transition through this 100%, they don't go and get wasted. They need to have a chance to do a course which can create employment for them, which can make them marketable. We need to relook into the courses which we are offering our kids at the tertiary level. If we are saying everyone is going to be taking merely hospitality and such courses, tourism, are there really jobs in those sectors? We really need to evaluate the kind of courses which are there in our tertiary institution so that we are simply not transitioning our kids from the primary and secondary to tertiary institutions without ensuring that they get the right skills so that they can get access to jobs after college. Because what we are doing currently, we are simply wasting most of them. I know, for example, in our universities, the prime courses which are there is medicine is the key, or related courses. Those are the best courses which are there. Engineering is one of them. Law is another one. Then education. But when you train a kid in criminology, surely those ones will tarmac forever. When you train, even I believe currently even the IT, when you are saying computer science, they are now flatted everywhere. It used to
Sorry, your time is over. So we will give Honorable Mogaka Kemosi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to the motion. Mr. Speaker, in Kenya today, where we are headed is to have technical courses offered in tertiary institutions. Mr. Speaker, the country like Japan and China, they are moving forward in terms of technology, not because the students who transit from high school join universities for degrees, but they join tertiary institutions like vocational courses where they are able to get knowledge in terms of technical courses. This is why we have seen a country like Japan has been able to move forward in terms of automotive sector. Mr. Speaker, in Kenya, the same can work. The only problem we have here in this country is the culture that if you do not have a degree, you will not be able to succeed in life. There are most jobs, Mr. Speaker, in the vocational sector, which are totally unexploited. Mr. Speaker, I'm very sure if you walk around your village, as well as my village, trying to look for a plumber, it will take you 2-3 days to get a plumber. And if you get that plumber, definitely you could be occupied in some other jobs. Mr. Speaker, it's high time that we move towards the vocational training where we can be able to get more people in such expertise. Mr. Speaker, I also want to recommend the government of Kenya for coming up with the proposal that each and every constituency in Kenya should have a vocational training college. I'm quite aware that some of the constituencies, they have already finished the construction of the said vocational courses, colleges, and some of them have even been equipped. I want to beseech and ask the Minister of Education, through the Department of Vocational Training, that the remaining colleges in various constituencies which have not been funded, to expedite the funding so that these colleges can also be equipped and start to operate. In my constituency, Mr. Speaker, in West Mugirango, I have a training technical college which is underway, and I do believe that in due time the ministry can be able to raise the funds so that we can be able to complete the said college. Mr. Speaker, I also want to ask my colleagues so that as we proceed, so as to be seen that we are also supporting this transition, that we are able to be able to spare some money from the CDF, that is in terms of bursaries, so that we can be able to give the students who have finished their Form 4, they can be able to join the tertiary colleges and be able to train accordingly. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I wish to support the motion.
Anzo Gitonga. You press the intervention slot. Or you come to the one, yes, proceed from there.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute on this important motion. Mr. Speaker, policy informs the making of law, and our Constitution under Article 55 is clear that this matter of training young people is mandatory. And therefore, at some point or another, we can graduate this motion into a law so that we have an equilibrium on how to make sure that, Mr. Speaker, those who don't make it to university or many people talented with the technology can access to training and can be able to be useful in many other parts of life, Mr. Speaker. One of the challenges, Mr. Speaker, is that we are bringing in a lot of manufactured goods from the, the countries such as Malaysia, furniture, which we can easily make locally. And part of it is because we don't have trained technicians who are refined sufficiently to be able to make very high quality. Although we have quite a number. And if you look at the displays at the prisons, you realize the talent in Kenya is enormous. So if we train more people and shift the education thinking such that everybody is not ready for a white-collar job, everybody is not ready for a degree, that we have many, many other Kenyans who divert to technology, and especially where we have to use our skills, such as masonry, construction, making things from wood, pottery. There's so much which can be done when people are trained, even making statues. There are people who earn their living from that. It's a very thorough training, but not many young Kenyans are aware of that, and that it is a well-paid job, including painting and many other areas in fine arts, where people can be trained and they will be self-employed. Also, they will encourage formation of companies which can go into manufacturing, which the government is very key on. But the thinking has been shaped differently, and I think through this motion, Mr. Speaker, we are able to change the way Kenyans think. And if my very good friend, the Honorable Munene, who is my classmate from university, we can work together with other lawyers and come up with an amendment into the current Act of Education to make sure this matter is now by law and is compulsory as it is required by Constitution, because the word used is shall, meaning that it is mandatory. Mr. Speaker, Australia was built by people who had skills in construction and in those many other areas before they first had lawyers and other professions, because the first people to go to Australia from the British government, Mr. Speaker, were jailbirds, were people who had been in jail and they had acquired some skills. And when they landed in Australia, it was very easy for them to build their country. And I believe if that happened in Australia, it can happen to Kenya if we concentrate on this in these courses. And Mr. Speaker, you realize the training is devolved. Most of the technical institutes are under the county government, Mr. Speaker. But there's a way the policy can be made so that the national government is able to work with the counties and ensure that each county has a minimum number, and as an area, particularly they are training, even if it is weaving, the kiondos we make should be a world market kiondo. If it is pottery, there are areas where Kenyans are very talented with the pottery, and such other areas where the trainings can be refined, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, I want to support this great initiative, Mr. Speaker, so that we can encourage our youths also to diversify into other areas where we can be able to earn a living and be able to increase the per capita in this country, increase the number of taxes we pay, because these businesses are recognized and their works can be seen, and also look for markets internationally so that our products can also be bought outside there. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Let's have the member for Wajir. That is Honorable Adan Sheikh. Did you want to speak to this one?
Yes, I do.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to support this motion because it is important. Education is very important for our children. And there are a lot of children who drop out of school due to lack of education or lack of school fee. And if this motion will be passed, it will give opportunity for the children of poor people whom their parents have no ability to educate them. And also, if we think of the pastoralist children, our pastoralist community who practice nomadic lifestyle of moving with their livestock from place to place doesn't understand the importance of education. The youths, the children who are from those communities are always very unlucky in terms of education, but if our government can put this policy in place, it will going to help so many children, and also maybe it will help us also to change our lifestyle. So I support this motion. Thank you.
Have the Honorable Murungara Kitonga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the chance to add my voice to this very important motion. First and foremost, let me congratulate the Member of Parliament for Kirinyaga Central, Honorable Munene Wambugu, for bringing such a timely motion and such a timely time. Mr. Speaker, allow me also, I think this is the greatest opportune moment for me to wish all the candidates, especially from the Tharaka constituency, Tharaka Nithi County, and in Kenya in general, including Kirinyaga Central, the very best in their KCPE exams and the KCSE exams. We are discussing a very important motion on 100% transition from secondary schools to tertiary institutions and universities. We started very well with the 100% transition from primary school to secondary schools, and this is doing very well. We know for sure it is a big burden to the country, it is a big burden to the leadership of the country and to ourselves, but we have seen the fruits, especially last year when we were able to enroll 98%, 99%, and in some areas 100% transition from primary school to secondary schools. It goes without gainsaying that in Kenya we must emphasize the importance of education, and especially in areas that consider themselves to be marginalized from other areas. And one such area is my constituency, Tharaka. I must therefore speak for them that when such a motion comes to Parliament, we should actually pass it and also assist Honorable Munene Wambugu. After passing this motion, we come up with a bill to actualize our thoughts into law. We must also join hands with Honorable Wambugu such that if we do not do a bill, we have an appropriate amendment to the education bill so that the 100% transition from secondary schools to tertiary institutions and the universities is captured in that law. Mr. Speaker, sir, we cannot have quality education unless we are able to improve on the facilities that are available to our schools. While we can emphasize on 100% transition, whether from primary school to secondary school, or from secondary school to tertiary institutions and universities, we may be talking about mass education, while we actually have to lay emphasis on quality education. This is the reason why the government must actually allocate enough resources to take care of infrastructure in terms of school equipment schemes, books, desks. We recently talked about laptops and other learning facilities. Our county governments must also emphasize on ECDE, building appropriate classes, furnishing those classes, and ensuring that those children who go for very basic education in nursery schools do have sufficient learning material. We also have another facility emphasized by the government, Minister of Energy, that all schools must be given electricity for purposes of learning. Regrettably, and I do regret this because in my constituency, we can only boast of a paltry 9.5% connectivity to the electricity grid, with almost 90% of the schools without electricity. I have been following this up with the Minister of Energy to know exactly what crime the people of Tharaka have committed so that they are treated to these inequities regarding distribution of electricity. I have not received any fair response to my questions and my inquiries, but I'm assured that there will be affirmative action to ensure that Tharaka has electricity, to ensure that all schools, primary schools, secondary schools, universities, and tertiary institutions have electricity for purposes of learning. And the government must also allocate sufficient revenue towards schools so that we can realize these goals we are debating this morning. The government has the 4 big agenda, which is good enough when they talk about food, infrastructure, housing, and health. But we must also remind the government that it's not just in infrastructure and housing that are important. We need to hear more about food, more about health, and we must introduce a fifth agenda, which is to give high quality education to our pupils, students, and other learners. We know for sure that tertiary institutions, especially TVET institutions, which are now found in almost all the constituencies, are very important institutions. So important that we would want our children to get skills. Skills are what is going to ensure that our students have employment. Our youths, our young people do have marketable skills. Skills that they can use when it comes to
sales. Haijafiki msikilizaji kiwango ambacho kinahitajika, na hicho ndicho kilimfanya Christopher Mulele kuagiza kwamba shughuli zisimamishwe kwa muda ili kuwapa fursa wabunge ambao walikuwa wameondoka nje.
Honorable members, we now have quorum. I hope the Honorable Sankok is satisfied. The Honorable Kaunya, you are on the floor. Proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. After that short interruption by Honorable Sankok, may I continue, Mr. Speaker? I was on the point that this policy should be able to address the equipping of these technical and vocational training institutions. It should address the equipping of the newly built. Like I would give the example of my constituency, we have chamasips and apprenticeships. Mr. Speaker, countries that have developed have made it a policy that internships are a must for all companies, private companies, and also government, and apprenticeships are a must for all those students that go through formal education. They are attached to companies, they are attached to government departments so that they are able to learn the skills that are useful, the life skills, to enable them to work. Mr. Speaker, with this motion, we should be able to have a policy that makes it mandatory for apprenticeships and for internships. And Mr. Speaker, this financial year, this Parliament, as you are aware, provided for funds to the Public Service Commission to be able to hire 3,000 interns who have actually been hired. These are graduates that have gone through post-secondary school education. For the first time, we'll have these graduates learning the skills on how to work in the public service, learning the tenets of public service, the ethics in the public service, which is quite important if we are to develop as a country. The public service has to be functional and efficient. We can only do that if we transform the formally educated graduates into skilled people and the people who understand their work ethics. Mr. Speaker, these internship programs should be encouraged, and this policy should also put it now, especially if we can have it as a law, that all those who transform, who finish secondary school and go to these tertiary and other institutions should now be able to go through those programs of internship and apprenticeships. Mr. Speaker, one other area that this policy should look into is the question of attitude or job attitude or mindset education. We will need this policy to deliberately develop systems to ensure that our youth now take the blue collar and the white collar jobs equally, so that we don't just work for white collar jobs, and that the youth start valuing the skills they get at the lower levels.
like the skills of plumbing, for example, which are in great shortage, skills of electrical, which are in great shortage, and even skills of farming, for example. We need to have a deliberate policy to ensure that we educate the youth, we sensitize the youth, give them that confidence that working even in other type of jobs pays in the same way. In developed countries, in fact, the percentage that transits to university is usually less than 15%. Majority crave to go for these skills that are practical, where they are able to self-employ or work in industry. So in this country, if we are to develop, we need to change the attitude, spend more on mindset education in giving a change of mindset so that we look at the lower jobs as very important, more important jobs than even the higher jobs where graduates go into. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, as a country, if we are to develop and if we are to succeed with the Big Four agenda, especially manufacturing, we need this 100% transition. And therefore, I support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Toom.
Honorable Speaker, I stand to support this motion. There is need for measures to ensure 100% transition from primary, secondary to tertiary institutions. And Honorable Speaker, let me keep my prayers to the Mau people who are staying outside their houses and they have children who are sitting their exams. They are staying in a stable environment. So my prayers are with the children who are sitting their exams who started this week and those who have done their practicals. We are praying for them to excel like other children who are in their stable homes. Honorable Speaker, it defeats logic when people are told to go where they came from because this Kenya is for all of us and anybody can stay anywhere. They have title deeds. Honorable Speaker, I take this opportunity to wish students from Nandi County, those who are doing their primary and secondary education, success. And I wish those who are doing in Kenya success. Honorable Speaker, when there are measures for transition to secondary and tertiary institutions, we'll have adequate personnel in our institutions. Honorable Speaker, the unemployment rate will reduce, the issue of poverty and lawlessness will reduce. So we need to support this motion so that we'll have adequate personnel. Honorable Speaker, we know the Jubilee government has 4 agendas, one of which is manufacturing, the other one is food security, the other one is housing and manufacturing. So if we develop technical institutions in our land, our children will access jobs. Honorable Speaker, we need more plumbers, we need electricians, we need masons, so that the Big Four agenda of housing, where we are going to construct 500,000 houses, will be accomplished. Honorable Speaker, I support this motion 100%. There is a lot of hopelessness amongst our youth because of unemployment. They have engaged in drug abuse, gender violence, because
required to implement this motion. And I would say it is not a lot, because from nursery all the way to Form 4, the government has already committed and has already used so much money on these students. So asking for 3 years more, to add 3 years more, and make this person acquire skills which can help him or her to earn a living, will not be asking for a lot. In any event, even when we say about Vision 2030, or even about the Big Four, without proper education, without proper skills, we will not, as a country, we will not achieve that. And if you look around the world, skills of its people. In fact, the biggest resources a country can have, it is its human resource. With the proper, well-educated population, you have a chance to even become a first-class world without necessarily having, relying on the minerals or other things. And the other beauty is, with good skills, you open up your scope. You don't need to look for a job in Kenya. You can even become a very good mechanic and go to work in America or somewhere or elsewhere, meaning that we will be creating a workforce which can work not just within our boundaries, but even outside our boundaries. And that way, they earn a living, and also we keep on enjoying diaspora remittance to the country. Mr. Speaker, if we pass this motion, the other issue will follow automatically. Like, there's a member who is about teachers. Do we have enough teachers to train these students once they go from 4 to tertiary education? And I would say that if we implement this motion and we go ahead and maybe make it to a bill and to pass to a law, it means the government will be required to employ teachers. And it is this parliament which will be required to allocate resources. And I believe education is the way actually we need to take our resources. And I believe as a country, we can be able to afford. I would want to add by saying that this is a motion which is going to benefit the whole country, our future, our children. They are going to benefit through, if this motion was to be implemented to the letter, and I sincerely thank the House, the honorable members, for supporting this motion en masse. And with those few remarks, I beg to reply. Thank you.
Well, I direct that the next necessary steps will be undertaken when the matter will be set down for consideration again on the order paper. I direct that we move on to the next order on the order paper.
Order number 13, motion, registration of farmers and formation of agribusiness entities for improved benefits and sustainable food and nutritional security.
The Honorable Dr. Mutunga, you're in the House. Proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to move this motion. Honorable Speaker, the motion before us, or before this Honorable House, seeks to recognize and expound on the spirit of the Crops Act 2013, whereby I will cite about 5 subsections of that act. The first one, Honorable Speaker,
the Honorable Dr. Mutunga.
Yes, Honorable Speaker, let me move the motion.
Yes, please.
Honorable Speaker, I do move the motion that aware that farmers in Kenya are least organized into associations following the collapse of the agricultural cooperatives. Further aware that the Crops Act 2013 provides for registration of farmers so as to establish who they are and what they produce, noting that government effort to establish farmers' organizations have ended up delivering short-lived and unsustainable initiative-based groups which fizzle out soon after their formation. Further noting that the best way to organize farmers is through their organizations, appreciating the best suited organization to undertake farmers registration is the Kenya National Farmers Federation, which has both experience and capacity. Further noting that through organized farmers, farming will be more beneficial in terms of volumes, lower cost of production, and improving organized raw material supply to the industry, realizing that organizing farmers into agribusiness entities is a costly undertaking which calls for government support, and acknowledging that through organized production systems, the country will achieve the Big Four agenda faster, and also create more and better jobs in the agricultural value chains. This House urges the government to facilitate and support the Kenya National Farmers Federation to mobilize and organize the registration of farmers into preferred entities and manage national farmers database for use in engagement and sustainable management of the various agricultural products value chains. Honourable Speaker, I do move. Honourable Speaker, I come from the background where we have an a Crops Act 2013, which has provisions that I may wish to highlight to this House. The first one is objective and purpose of this particular act, which is section 3, that basically presupposes that the act is supposed to accelerate the growth and development of the agriculture in general, and enhance productivity and incomes of the farmers and rural population, improve investment climate and the efficiency of agribusiness development, agricultural crops and exports that will augment the foreign exchange earnings of the country through promotion of the production, processing, marketing, and distribution of crops in Arab areas of this country, and also section 8 on promotion of scheduled crops. There is also section 14, which is freedom to register, especially subsection E, and section 15, which has to do with the registration of growers association, especially section 15C and D, and finally, the registration of dealers, which is section 16, the whole of it. Honourable Speaker, any agricultural transformation agenda demands that the actors are known and organized. The very elaborate agricultural cooperative movement, and I may wish to cite the coffee and tea cooperatives, was very laudable effort in this particular country. It was not done easily. It took putting up such initiative, involving identification, listing, and registration of especially the farmers who are involved in those cooperatives and who performed their duties whereby their products were finally being marketed by the cooperatives. The extent to which farmers are known and registered determines the strength and the strength of the resultant entity. Honourable Speaker, the supplies management of tea, save for the hiccups that we have in the tea industry today, is a laudable effort and a success story quoted all over the world. Honourable Speaker, organization is about individuals. It's about the database of the farmers, and it is also the form and the context that it takes. The section, the Societies Act Cap 108 presupposes that entities could register as societies for ease of doing business, especially when their operational volumes and contributions are small. Honourable Speaker, the societies are held together and sustained through knowledge and the preservation of the right to associate as provided for in the Kenyan Constitution under the Bill of Rights. Honourable Speaker, farmer registration is the basis of all forms of organization in the agricultural sector, since the individuals form entities and entities form conglomerates. The Kenyan agricultural sector needs to transform, and considerably so. So efforts that have been put in the direction of transformation of the agricultural sector have not yielded a lot of effort. However, a lot of resources have already been used. The impact of those resources cannot be clearly seen, though quite enormous, because there has been minimal effort in organizing farmers. The focus on organizing farmers has been little. Honourable Speaker, if we invested a fraction of those resources, first of all, to organize the farmers, the resources used in infrastructure development and personnel development of the sector, we would have yielded a lot of benefits. And Kenya would be a quoted African economy that has been moved through agricultural transformation. Honourable Speaker, the missing link is therefore proper and deliberate farmer organization. A close scrutiny of the Kenyan agricultural reform agenda conceived under 3 strategies that I may wish to quote. The strategy for revitalizing of agriculture, which was launched in 2014, and mechanisms of acquisition of these inputs, the ecology, among others. The information above on our speaker shows that levels of integration into the agricultural sector provided in the value chain. We need to wake up to the reality that farmers need to be organized for us to grow small to big. Farming has also been promoted as a business over a long time in this country, but it just ends up with the statements that farming should be a business. Businesses have inputs and output domains. We must be clear that we need to transform our agriculture into business. Without the capture of the farmers' database, we will only plan to fail because we will not have planned properly with the data. Honourable Speaker, farming being a long-term process needs to be well planned. It's a formidable business process. The African Union agenda, agricultural agenda, Honourable Speaker, speaks to this particular fact. The NEPAD agricultural agenda is captured under what is called the Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program, commonly known as CANDIP. CANDIP remains an operational framework for the African countries to be able to interpret and apply so that they may be able to develop their agriculture effectively and for agriculture to steer growth and development of the countries. CANDIP prescribes a set of indicators for growth and development of the agricultural sector of all the countries who will be signed to this process, and I want to report that Kenya is a signed member of AU, so Kenya is signed up to CANDIP. The reporting mechanism is consultative and collaborative. Where farmers are not organized, their input is always missed out of such reporting mechanism. In Kenya, Kenya has considerably interpreted CANDIP, Honourable Speaker, through the transformation of the objectives of the agricultural sector development strategy, which were made CANDIP compliant in 2010. Honourable Speaker, that was the birth of the agricultural sector development strategy. Through the framework of action in Maputo in 2003, which the African ends of state and government signed, Kenya is being one of them, the African ends of state committed themselves to support agriculture by up to 10% of the national budget come 2008. That is 5 years later. That declaration was signed up by ends of states and government, and they committed themselves to the African agricultural development agenda. If the farmers were registered, therefore, organized as it were, they would have effectively lobbied to achieve this particular agenda come 2008. Because farmers are not organized in this country, they do not have a strong voice, and therefore they are not able to move their agenda effectively. The same initiative was formed into a more laudable and more actionable framework 10 years later in Malabo as the Malabo Framework for Action. Just for information, Honourable Speaker, Kenya is a signatory. Kenya is therefore yet to meet our obligations, always excusing ourselves in the casting and interpretations. What I mean by casting and interpretation, Honourable Speaker, is that the agricultural sector is lumped up with the other sectors, the sectors in the rural development. And infrastructural development is sometimes linked up to agriculture as part of the contribution. So if the farmers were registered, then effectively organized and signed up, the signed up pact would have been implemented because they would have lobbied and pushed for it. If indeed we are registered farm organization, not only the government would be in high alert, on our Speaker, but I believe even ourselves would be in high alert to listen to the farmers' issues, as it were. So for the Kenyan agriculture to work, we need an agrarian reform. If not an agrarian revolution, on our Speaker. Many efforts have been put in place and tried out in this country, but the options have not yielded the relevant results. We have initiatives like the AGRA, the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, which is trying to do something about agrarian reform, but it lacks in terms of the approach. AGRA sounds like it is bent to deliver Pan-African agricultural reform, but it falls short of a few issues that I may wish to mention. A revolution, Honourable Speaker, is an all resources, all efforts, all possibilities resolve Honourable Speaker, we need a revolution in the agricultural sector for us to cause the needed agricultural domains to change for the better. We need to change our farming systems. We need to change our approach to agriculture. We need to change the sizes of our land. A revolution is therefore thorough, systematic, consultative, and highly resource-oriented. Looking at AGRA as an initiative to cause agrarian reform, it leaves us worried because very little, if anything, goes to the direction of registration, segregation, aggregation, or organization of farmers. Honourable Speaker, none of our countries have so far considerably prioritized agriculture. None of our counties, I stand corrected, none of our counties have so far prioritized agriculture in order to effectively develop the counties. While we know, Honourable Speaker, that the greater majority of the counties will depend on agriculture to grow, very few of them are prioritized agriculture. Apart from Mombasa's county and Nairobi, which might get their income from other sources, all the other counties will need to improve their agriculture for them to grow. So farmer registration is the first step in realizing green revolution in Kenya, as it is in realizing green revolution anywhere else in the world. Farmers are the soldiers in this particular war. Borrowing from the developed world, Honourable Speaker, most countries grew from agriculture for them. Organized production systems, also called for zoning of the Arab land, and also determining the production zones based on the ability to produce. Industries are collocated with the production systems so that we may be able to be supplied with the raw materials. If we have to realize the Big Four agenda, then we must be able to organize our raw materials and link these raw materials to these industries. Honourable Speaker, farmers in this country have lost confidence in government-driven formations, and I want to cite the case of cooperatives. The cooperative movement collapsed because a cooperative officer could change the decision of a cooperative board or a cooperative committee. And that is the reason why most of the farmers have no confidence in cooperative movement. Honourable Speaker, whether mature or otherwise, prepared or not, soon and very soon, the Kenyan farmers will be on their own. I would like to say that the Kenyan farmers will be their own because when you look at what is happening in the agricultural sector, most of the technocrats in the agricultural sector are retiring and the government is not replacing. Before we find farmers purely on their own, we need to have the farmers organized so that they may be able to receive extension services or consultancy services through organized systems. Unless we have smallholder farmers organized, they may not be able to buy extension services as much as they also may not be able to buy the inputs. All they need is a supportive policy framework that will state the investment, which must be free of influence. These processes, Honourable Speaker, must be farmer-owned, farmer-driven, farmer-managed, and farmer-governed. That is why, therefore, it invites the need for a farmer organization to spearhead this particular process. Farmers trust their own. They believe in themselves, and they form and run their organizations. For that to happen, Honourable Speaker, farmer registration must be domiciled in the umbrella body of the farmers. An umbrella body of the farmers is one where the general and the multi-level organizations and also the specialized commodity associations are anchored. Such formations exist on our Speaker, which we have the structures that we have described, and the Kenya National Farmers Federation is one of them. In this organization, Honourable Speaker, is older than the country itself. It was formed in 1947 and registered in 1949. And the organization has changed form over time, and it is capable of managing the farmer registration and organization process. Honourable Speaker, farmer registration and organization is an expensive exercise. It cannot be done without government support. For such a process to succeed, in view of the importance, our government must spend the resources. Such resources, Honourable Speaker, are worth a lot more than any other form of investment that our government would come up with, because they unlock the potential for industrial development of this country through diversification and production of raw materials. Many industries, Honourable Speaker, mean better wealth creation for this country. Many industries mean better job creation and more jobs created. Honourable Speaker, if there's anything we need in this country, it is jobs created, and the agricultural sector, which supports this particular economy, the GDP at 34% directly and 27% indirectly, is capable of supporting this country to grow and develop. Classical examples that have been there on our speaker, in this particular country, we have models that we can cite, and these models are available, for instance, the Moya model and others. On our speaker, an organized agricultural system will deliver lots of benefits, and I would wish to allude to some of these benefits. One of them will be raw material supply to the industry.
Honorable members, the Honorable Mboi, member for Kathiani, and the member for Machakos. The consultations are a bit loud. Allow the Honorable Dr. Kanyithia to finish his moving his motion.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I was getting a little bit attracted to the conversation, and I was wondering whether they are discussing the agricultural sector. Honorable Speaker, thank you very much. I wish to continue. Some of these benefits include the raw material consolidation to supply to industry, an organized industrial system. They include better investment environment through increased options and opportunities, also income to the farmers themselves and the other value chain actors, and more money to the commodity market itself. Better business environment, food and nutrition security, just to mention a few. Food and nutrition security, Honorable Speaker, is an outcome of an organized farmer system, especially the smallholder farmers as categorized.
The Honorable Kanyithia, I'll allow you 1 minute. I know when you're when it's flowing, sometimes you forget time.
Okay.
That your time has lapsed.
Okay, Honorable Speaker,
I will
I just
allow you
conclude.
1 minute to move.
Honorable Speaker, I just would like to conclude by saying that we could divide this country. How do we organize the farmers? First of all, divide this countryside into farmer clusters and catchments. These catchments, Honorable Speaker, would form what are called producer business groups. The producer business groups would have similar product orientation and could cluster to form agribusiness clusters. These agribusiness clusters are the ones that would own what we are calling warehouses by use of the warehouse resisting law that we passed in this house recently. And these warehouses will give farmers a steady income in terms of the value for their product and also in terms of keeping their products, as it were. These would also be the sources of raw materials for the industry if and when such industries are established. That way, Honorable Speaker, would have an agricultural transformation agenda that is realistic and that is targeted at sustainability. Honorable Speaker, with those remarks, and in the hope that I have communicated to my colleagues, I beg to move, and I call upon Honorable Sholai to second. Thank you.
The Honorable Sholai.
Honorable Speaker, I want to appreciate the mover of this motion, Dr. John Mutunga, because this is an extremely important motion. Because this country most of its GDP is based on agriculture. It is also that 70% of the food consumed in this country is produced by smallholder farmers. And therefore, the motion and the request that farmers be registered is an imperative. It is an economic imperative for this country. This country cannot transform or improve its yields in farming if we do not have registration of farmers. The country cannot be able to plan well if they are not able to, if they don't know how many farmers they have, what activities those farmers are involved in, how many persons are employed by those farmers, what other side activities like production of biogas and so on are being done by these farmers. And therefore, registration would enable the country to have a more directed policy and more directed resources in the correct areas of promoting agriculture. It will further be the only way that one of the 4 pillars on food security by His Excellency the President can succeed. Without registration of farmers, this will be an impossibility. A good example is of the dangers of not registering our farmers is recently we heard that Kenya had a shortage of maize and that we needed to import. But because we haven't registered our farmers, it is impossible to know how many farmers actually do have grain in their farms, in the warehouses, in their farms. Forget what is in the strategic food reserve stores or what is with the National Cereals and Produce Board. And therefore, we always run into the danger that the imported maize comes in and eventually the farmers, there's a excess in the market and therefore the farmers eventually suffer. Also, it will allow does not farmers or activities the farmers are involved in, then their research is actually like walking blindly as a country. Also, we will be able, with registration of farmers, we will be able to boost productivity. Currently, as a representative of Uasin Gishu County, I will use the example of Uasin Gishu County, is that the average production of maize per acre in farms is 15 bags per acre. Yet, I know one farmer in Uasin Gishu called Kruger who produces an average of 45 bags per acre. Therefore, we are at less than 50% optimum production in farming. And if we knew which farmers are not, if the farmers were registered, we would know that such a farmer is not using adequate fertilizer or there needs to be done soil analysis so that we can help them improve their farming practices. Also, it will help us in cases of marketing and also in cases of promoting certain crops, so that if too many farmers are registered as producing maize, then we can now call for diversification, understanding what crop or what farm produce we have shortages in Kenya. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, the need to register farmers it's such an imperative that it is shocking that we have not begun to undertake this after 55 years of independence. And as I second this motion, I want to close by giving just the example of a country like Malawi during the presidency of Mutharika. Probably that has changed now, where they moved from a food-deficient country to a food-sufficient country only because they knew the number of farmers that they have. They had registered their farmers, they knew the number of farmers they had, and even the subsidy, the fertilizer subsidy and the seed subsidy was being delivered directly to farms and or through the associations that the farmers had formed. In Kenya, when they are currently being sold through commercial outlets, which in fact has been used by cartels to only make money for themselves. And so with those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I second the motion. Thank you.
Honorable members, allow me to propose the question. That are aware that farmers in Kenya are at least organized in associations following the collapse of the agricultural cooperatives, further aware that the Crops Act 2013 provides for registration of farmers so as to establish who they are and what they produce, noting that the government's efforts to establish farmers' organizations have ended up delivering short-lived and unsustainable initiative-based groups which fizzle out soon after their formation, further noting that the best way to organize farmers is through their organizations, appreciating that the best suited organization to undertake farmers registration is the Kenya National Farmers Federation, which has both experience and capacity, further noting that through organized farmers, farming will be more beneficial in terms of volumes, lower cost of production, and improving organized raw material supply to industry, realizing that organizing farmers into agribusiness entities is a costly undertaking which calls for government support, and acknowledging that through organized production systems, the country will achieve the Big Four agenda faster and also create more and better jobs in the agricultural value chains. This House urges the government to facilitate and support the Kenya National Farmers Federation to mobilize and organize the registration of farmers into preferred entities and manage national farmers database for use in engagements and sustainable management of the various agricultural product value chains. Honorable members, having listened to the mover and the seconder, you realize that the Honorable Dr. Kanyithia has brought to this House a very important motion, really, that it is amazing that this country, which sustains itself on agriculture, does not have proper data on the farmers that are supposed to be the bedrock of its economy. So I think this is a very important discussion that we are going to have. And the first one to have a go at it will be the member for Mumias East, the Honorable Ashiali.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, allow me to thank Dr. John Mutunga for bringing this motion, which is a very important motion, Honorable Speaker. And having looked at the motion and the effects of this motion, I was actually going to suggest that Honorable Dr. John Mutunga should move very quickly and do a bill, because it's only from a bill that then the government can start moving. Honorable Speaker, agriculture is one of the sectors that have been devolved. I think it's fully devolved. But, Honorable Speaker, there is still a confusion. The confusion is that up to today, the government cannot tell up to where it reaches and where the county government takes over. Because it's not very clear on the roles of the county government when it comes to agriculture. And I was also going to suggest that in as much as we debate this, we need also to encourage county assemblies to also come in with these bills, because most of the agriculture business is done in the county governments, and we will really wish that we encourage them to also develop a register for farmers, because you cannot do much if you do not know the people you are dealing with. Honorable Speaker, I am a member of Parliament representing farmers, actually farmers, mainly sugar farmers until the other day when Mumias started misbehaving, and maize farmers and many other crops. Honorable Speaker, it is not possible. It is not possible, and I'm sure the government must have had it very difficult, and I wish this decision should have been brought much earlier. Because how would you employ extension farmers when we don't know how many farmers these extension officers are going to deal with? How would you know? And that's why it has been very difficult even for the extension farmers to know, the extension officers to know the number of farmers they are dealing with, because they just used to give a standard measure. You will find that all the agricultural officers are sent in all the districts in the same manner. Honorable Speaker, it will not be logical for one to employ an agricultural officer in a district in Garissa or in a district in the arid areas, because there's no agriculture taking place. There, they will be better placed with the animal officers, the livestock officers, as opposed to the agricultural officers. And therefore, for one to employ extension officers, you must be able to tell the number of farmers you are having, the kind of crops that are being developed, and what you expect to get after they have done what they need to do. Honorable Speaker, to eliminate quacks, we have had farmers' organizations like we used to have the Kenya Sugar Board. You will find that even to identify who the directors representing farmers, the farmers themselves must be the ones to be involved in the election of the directors. But you find directors coming in who do not know much about the farming, and sometimes even the crop that they are representing, because we have allowed quacks to present themselves as farmers, and that's why they also elect quacks to represent those farmers when they know nothing about the crop they are representing, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, is the aspect of timely payment to farmers. It should only be people who know what about. But if we do not have this kind of register, we are not able to tell how many of our Kenyans are doing macadamia. How are we going to assist them market their produce? Honorable Speaker, to me, this is a very, very important motion. I am sure this is where we have been going wrong as a country, and I want to encourage and request, as I had, like I had done earlier, to encourage my brother John Mutunga to move further and develop a bill. I'm sure we are going to support that bill so that we can have an organized sector that would help these Kenyans move to the next step. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Very well spoken, Dr. The Honorable Ashiali, but it is Dr. Mutunga, not Don. The Honorable Murigi, Paul Murigi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this opportunity to support this motion. Mr. Speaker, farmers are the key people whom the government should focus in this republic, Mr. Speaker. Since whatever we consume in this republic, Mr. Speaker, they are produced by the farmers. The offices which we hold, Mr. Speaker, they are facilitated by the farmers, Mr. Speaker. So it is important for us members to support this motion so that farmers can be recognized. Because, Mr. Speaker, when we will have these organizations, Mr. Speaker, the government will be in a good position of managing the farmers, and even when funding them, Mr. Speaker, they will be in a good position of funding the farmers, Mr. Speaker. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, through the organization of the farmers after registration, Mr. Speaker, the government will be aware of how many farmers we have in this country, Mr. Speaker, the crops or the types of the crops which they produce, Mr. Speaker, and this also will help us, Mr. Speaker, to be food sufficient country, Mr. Speaker. Because many of the times, Mr. Speaker, we suffer because we are not aware of what is being produced, where some of the crops can be or can do well in this country, Mr. Speaker. But through the organizations, Mr. Speaker, of the farmers, we will be able to, or the government will be able to map those places and direct the correct crops which are supposed to be planted in those areas, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when the farmers will be registered through the organizations, even the marketing of their product, the marketing of their crops, Mr. Speaker, will be simple and they will earn well, Mr. Speaker. Because currently, the importation, for example, the importation of maize, Mr. Speaker, you hear a certain farmer or a certain person supplying a lot of tons of maize, Mr. Speaker, and when you ask where that person was producing or where that person was farming, Mr. Speaker, you cannot be in a position of identifying that farm that person has done his farming. But through this registration, Mr. Speaker, will help us to help the farmers earn well and even sell their produce well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also the government will now be serious to focus or to shift their focus to the farmers, Mr. Speaker, because farmers will have a strong organization whereby they can give the ideas what they want the government to do, the direction they want to take, Mr. Speaker, because if the farmers of this country, they have the organization, Mr. Speaker, this country would have been transformed. Then this also will help the government when budgeting to give the agriculture, Mr. Speaker, enough a budget. Because currently, the way the budget is set, Mr. Speaker, the way money is being given to Ministry of Agriculture, Mr. Speaker, it is not the way it should be done, because they are given very little money, Mr. Speaker, to run this ministry, Mr. Speaker. And knowing that this is the backbone of the country, Mr. Speaker, the government should channel its effort to answer the farmers, Mr. Speaker. Also, Mr. Speaker, the place where I come from, when we have this organization, for example, to govern the miraa sector, Mr. Speaker, which is a foreign earner in our place and which normally contribute a lot in the foreign income of this country, Mr. Speaker, it will help the farmers, also the farmers of miraa, Mr. Speaker, to have this organization and even do marketing and lobby for new market from outside, Mr. Speaker, a market which can buy their product from their farms, Mr. Speaker. So it is a good motion, Mr. Speaker, which Mheshimiwa or Dr. Mutunga has brought into this House, Mr. Speaker, and it is a motion which we are supposed to support in full capacity, Mr. Speaker, because the places or the constituencies which we present in this House, Mr. Speaker, most of them, Mr. Speaker, they consist of farmers. Because I understand in my constituency, Mr. Speaker, we normally farm everything. We farm miraa, we farm tea, we farm coffee, we farm bananas, we farm maize, Mr. Speaker. We keep livestock, Mr. Speaker, meaning that, Mr. Speaker, when this motion will pass and when the bill also will be brought in this House, Mr. Speaker, and we pass it, Mr. Speaker, our people whom we present will benefit more, and they will be happy because of the work which we will have done to them. So I beg my fellow members, Mr. Speaker, to support this, to support the motion, Mr. Speaker, and the
connections and networks that are being appointed to these bodies, and as a result, they fail to give directions to this association. So, Honorable Speaker, we need to make sure that these farmers' associations are autonomous. They are being run by the people who have knowledge and experience on farming, in terms of livestock, in terms of fisheries, in terms of agriculture, so that when they make a decision, they can make a decision that they know, that will not affect the farmer. Honorable Speaker, another principle that we need to consider when we are going to form this association is professionalism. We need people who are agricultural producers, such as livestock farmers, foresters, fishermen, to be included in decision making. Honorable Speaker, before we form these associations, we must first, because farmers are discouraged in this country. Farmers of this country are discouraged because they are not benefiting from what they are doing in this country. So for us to encourage them and for us to motivate them to start these associations, we need to renew their interest, to tell them they need to have this association because there are some benefits. Because they are discouraged, Honorable Speaker. Last year, many farmers wasted their produce. Up to now, they have used those products for their livestock. So we need to encourage them, motivate them. Let's renew their interest so that they can form this association. Honorable Speaker, let them this concern take the audit of farmers. How are they? How many are they in every sector? As members have spoken, we need to know how many farmers do we have in this country. You know the scandal that happened last year, Honorable Speaker. The maize that this country bought came from outside this country. And the maize of this country, well, it was not bought. There are people who take the role of supplying maize to the government, and yet they are not farmers. They have never stepped in the farm. They have never suffered. So, Honorable Speaker, we need the Ministry concerned to take audit how many farmers really have farms and they should go to see those farms. Come on, whether they are in Transoya, whether in Wasingishu, whether in Lodwa, whatever they are. Let them go and audit so that you can have a name of the farmer and how many acres he wants and what he's planting in his land. So that whenever we have these guys who are importing cheaper maize to this country, they will ask, where is your farm? Where is your farm? So that we can protect the farmers. Honorable Speaker, we need these associations to help farmers to put their resources together for their development. Honorable Speaker, when we bring these associations, the farmers can bring their resources together and they can take loan and they can do development at their personal level, Honorable Speaker. Because now to access loan, and by the way, Honorable Speaker, the President rejected the proposal that we had given about the capping of the interest. Now, if that, Honorable Speaker, will go through, then that means taking a loan in this country will be very expensive. So we need to have farmers associations where they can take loan at the cheaper interest. So we need to have this association, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we need to have this association because to protect and enhance the economic well-being and quality of life of family farmers. Honorable Speaker, if there's a poor person in this country, it's a farmer. It's a farmer. I am a pastoralist. I have some goats and all that. But Honorable Speaker, if you compare the life of a farmer and a pastoralist, the worst work to do in this country is to be a farmer. I have a small farm in Kitale. I did a little of maize planting last year. It got wasted. I decided to take it to Turkana and give to my goats because there was no place to sell. So we need to have these associations, Honorable Speaker, to enhance the economic or to empower the farmers, to give them purchase power so that they can also buy things with their own money. Honorable Speaker, with those few remarks, I support. Thank you.
Very well spoken, the Honorable question. The Honorable, the next member. No, I was praising the member for Turkana Central. You have not spoken, the Honorable Pukose, but you are the next one.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for allowing me to contribute to this very important motion by Honorable John Mutunga, member for Tigania West. Honorable Speaker, before I support this, I want to take this opportunity to wish the pupils of Endebess constituency, all the schools, and my friend, Honorable Ferdinand Wanyonyi, who is my neighbor, his students, also pupils from Kwangsa constituency, who are my neighbors. You know, we are sibling brothers. The success in their KCB and also in the KCSE exams which are coming. It's a very important turning point for them in their life, and I hope that they'll put more effort, and us as leadership will do our best to make sure that we have 100% transition to the secondary education. Honorable Speaker, this is a very key motion, considering that some of us are from agricultural potential areas. Transoya is the bread basket of this country, especially in as far as maize farming is concerned. But currently we are also engaged in other diversifications where we are planting tea, coffee, wheat, and many other crops. We are also doing dairy farming in large scale. And I think this